coast to coast, the Pac-12 to the SEC, and every conference in between, Stoney Keeley and Stephen McCash break down all the action from the week that was in college football, react to the AP Top 25 poll, talk Heisman race, and dive into all of the most interesting lines of the week based on what the odds makers are saying in the SEC and on the national scale. This is the College Football Roundup on Sobros Network.
We are back, episode 10 of the 2024 College Football Roundup right here on Sobros Network. Mine's right, ass is tight, as we've got a championship Saturday to preview on today's show. We're going to talk college football playoff rankings because it's been quite the discussion the last 24 hours or so since those bad boys have come out. And we're gonna get back on the wagon here. It's been a month without the College Football Roundup. I'm not happy about it. These things don't happen on purpose, but sometimes shit happens in life, and this is what we've got to deal with. I am your host for the show, the EIC at SobrosNetwork.com, Big Natural Stoney Keeley. You can follow me on Twitter at Stoney Keeley, collectively at Sobros Network on all major social media platforms. Joined as usual by the utility man of Sobros Network. I think the last time we saw McCash was on the VixFlix podcast from a hotel room in Memphis, Tennessee, covering the Indy Memphis Film Festival. But now we're on here talking college football. The man can do it all. McCash, how you doing today, my man?
Man, pretty good. Cold and tired. Winter has finally made its way to the south. I know you guys got some snow up in Nashville last night. All we got was chilly here in Memphis, but I'm good. It has been a few weeks, unfortunately, because there was a lot to talk about, and maybe we'll recap a couple of things. But yeah, this rankings that came out has a lot of people butthurt.
They are.
Well, I guess we'll get into it and see if our cheeks are a little red or not.
So do we want to lead off the show with the most important news of the day, though, that your Memphis Tigers will be headed to, I think it's Dallas, to play the West Virginia Mountaineers in the Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl. Have you ever had? You're not a coffee guy.
No, not a coffee drinker at all. I drive by them. We have them here in Memphis.
Yeah, I like a good cup of Scooters coffee. And we've got one right down the road from us here in Mount Juliet. But what do you think of the bowl matchup? Are you excited? Could you not care less? What is it?
I could not care less about this matchup. Look, we're 10-2 on the year. Really only one bad loss on the year, and that was the UTSA game. The Navy game, I can't really get upset about losing that game with the way Navy was playing the first half of the season. Injuries really took Navy out of everything with their quarterback being dinged up and such. So really, I thought we would get a better bowl game than this. But a lot of the talking heads here in town over the last couple of hours since it's been released have kind of made me make sense of this. Like, in today's coaching world, if you're not in one of the top bowls around New Year's Day and such, you are better off getting your bowl game out of the way as soon as possible. So you start working on transfer portal, and so much and other things like that. So I guess from a executive standpoint, I guess I'm happy with this. It's in 2 weeks on a Tuesday, December 17th down in Frisco. I've been in that stadium. It's a really nice stadium. Their MLS team in Dallas plays there. I saw Jimmy Buffett there. And
nice.
And so it's a great venue. Frisco's a huge. Frisco is the, I guess, equivalent to Nashville what Franklin is. It's much bigger and a lot more going on. Don't get me wrong, but I'm trying to give you a slight comparison so those who don't know anything about Frisco would kind of have a somewhat understanding of what it's like there.
Is it like having a bowl game at what's the name of the outdoor venue down there? I've fucked the joke up completely because I can't remember the name of it.
The one that's built in the quarry.
Yes.
I don't remember their name, and I don't care to remember the name because when I reached out to them to do some coverage for their opening, they never responded to me. So whatever.
Yeah, fair enough. Well,
but as far as the matchup, okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was going to say, as far as the matchup goes, Memphis will have the majority of their roster there for the game. They're very senior heavy loaded. A lot of them want to get one last game in. As far as West Virginia, they fired their coach this past Sunday after they got beat like 52-10 or whatever. And so they've already had players dip their toes into the transfer portal already. So I'm expecting a lot of turnaround for that West Virginia roster come December 17th.
Yeah, they've got quite a few guys that are going to be thinking about the NFL draft next spring too. And I know, it depends on draft status. Like Wyatt Milam, who could be a fringe first round pick, probably shouldn't expect him to play in this game. But there are some fringe guys, some defensive backs, some defensive linemen that are working on like Hula Bowl invitations, and you always like to have that extra tape out there. So I'm kind of curious between the draft, like just the attrition of the season being over, and now guys can rest and get healthy. You don't want to risk getting injured in a bowl game. And then, like you said, the transfer portal. I'm kind of interested to see what kind of rosters actually show up for this game. What about Seth Hennigan, McCash? Because I haven't watched a lot of Memphis football. Is he a guy that you think like it benefits him to play in this game?
I think it will, and I say this because he kind of had a down year this year. He still put up great numbers. His interceptions were up. Some of those interceptions were just hideously ugly, including that pick six at the end of the Navy game that kind of sealed the game for Navy as we were driving to take the lead at the end. But I think him being a senior one last time playing will help his potential draft status. I also think if he gets an invite, which he may have already got an invite to the Senior Bowl, I'm not sure. He posted something on Instagram about an invite to something. I don't remember what it was, but I think another bowl game and then either a Senior Bowl or one of the other, graduating seniors bowl. I think it'll do him a lot of good, especially after the kind of so season he had.
Fair enough. Well, I don't think anybody expected us to lead the first 8 minutes of this show breaking down the Frisco Bowl between Memphis and West Virginia, but here we are nonetheless. I'll say this, McCash, if you were an MTSU fan, they got their bowl hopes out of the way really early this season, so we don't even have to worry about that. Let's talk about these college football playoff rankings, because it is quite interesting how this thing shook down. We'll start at the top with the top four: Oregon, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame. The only real movement there is Notre Dame cracking the top four, and the only reason they cracked the top four is because Ohio State obviously lost a really ugly game to the Michigan Wolverines as 19.5-point favorites the last I checked. They slide all the way down to number 6, but those top four teams, you think about, the implications if this was still a 4-team playoff. Those look like the right 4 teams to you?
I mean, it's hard to argue those 4 teams, but at the same time, I'm going to anyway.
Fair enough.
Oregon, without a doubt, has been the best team all year long.
They're the last 12-0 team standing.
Yeah.
No more undefeated teams.
Then Texas really hasn't beat really anybody or played really anybody. Penn State, when they did play somebody tough, they lost.
Yeah.
And then Notre Dame, I can't really put my full faith in them because of that ugly loss to Northern Illinois at the beginning of the year. So I think there's some arguments that record-wise, yes, you got the 4 right teams, but when it comes down to X's and O's, when it's all said and done, I don't think we have the 4 best teams. I think we have one of the best 4 teams.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. That's actually the exact way I was going to phrase it. From a record standpoint, yeah, it's easy to put those teams as the top 4. But if you're talking about projecting in these one-on-one matchups, I don't know that these teams are going to be favored in their matchups. When you look at Georgia, a team that had a bit of a scare against Georgia Tech on Black Friday. That
Yeah,
game going into 8 overtimes. The Yellow Jackets really should have won that contest. They were up by
absolutely.
2 scores late into it. Georgia just finds a way, fights back. A lot of talent on that roster. Ohio State still at 6. Man, I know everybody and their mama is out for Ryan Day's head right now, and I don't think, man, I don't think he survives if they're a first round exit from the playoffs. I think
Mm.
he might get the axe. I think the Michigan loss was that bad. But then I look at like Tennessee, and I think Tennessee's capable of beating one of these top 4 teams. I think you look at a team like Boise State that we've been high on. I mean, they played Oregon pretty tight. That's their only loss of the season. They're sitting all the way down there at 10. I think you can make an argument that they've probably played some of the best football among anybody in the country. So it's an easy choice to put those in the top 4, but I don't know that they're necessarily the 4 best teams in the country right now. So let's round out the top 10 then. You have Georgia at number 5, Ohio State at number 6, Tennessee at number 7, SMU 11-1 SMU at 8, Indiana standing pat at 9, and then Boise State at number 10. All let's see, SMU, Indiana, and Boise are all 11-1. Georgia, Ohio State, and Tennessee all 10-2. What stands out to you about the rest of the top 10?
I would probably go with Ohio State. I look at it this way: they dropped 4 spots uh, to Michigan that they were basically a 3-score favorite of.
Yeah. Mhm.
Indiana, who was a big underdog the week prior, dropped 5 or 6 spots that week after that loss. Um, so why didn't that turn around and do the same to Ohio State? I think I would have switched them in Tennessee, if
For
not
sure.
Tennessee and SMU.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely Tennessee. I mean, that's the thing that stands out to me is the fact that if this thing were to if these were to be the final standings, how it would shake down, Tennessee will be going to Columbus to play a first round
Right.
game, and that absolutely should not be the case. And
No.
just even though we're arguing over one spot, when you look at the implications for the tournament, it matters, man. And I
Yeah.
think Tennessee is absolutely better than Ohio State right now. I think if that matchup happens and they do go to Columbus, I think Tennessee smokes them. I think Tennessee wins that game pretty easily. But the point is, it should be in Knoxville because Tennessee has put together the better resume. They look better right now than Ohio State does. And I think, the Vols fans, everybody in Knoxville has a right to be upset about this ranking. It seems pretty egregious to me. The other thing I would mention is that I'd probably have Boise State ranked above Indiana and SMU right now. What do you think
Oh, I
about their
definitely would.
ranking at number 10?
I've been a proponent of Boise State all year long. I actually predicted them to be in this spot. Uh, and I know for a fact, now granted, I don't know who the committee is and is
Yeah.
determining this, but all year long, the AP, the press have not giving BYU the love that they deserved because of the conference they're in and their strength of schedule. But let's be honest, teams like SMU and Indiana are basically playing the same type of teams outside of like 1 or 2.
Yeah.
But if I was to take Indiana or SMU and send them up to Oregon to play Oregon like Boise did, trust me, those games wouldn't have been as close as the Boise game would have been. So I definitely would put Boise State. I probably have Boise State in that 7-8 range.
Yeah, I think people are sleeping on how good this team is. I'm gonna be stoked if they can actually go on a run here. And that's part of why we like the expansion of the playoff because it does finally give a team like this the chance to go on a run.
Yeah,
Yeah, and C Hutch in the comments echoes that sentiment. Felt Boise State should be 7 or 8.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
exactly.
no gripe for me. Now let's get to what has everybody talking. Right there at number 11, 3-loss Alabama Crimson Tide team. The Miami Hurricanes at 10-2 are right there at 12. And then you have a couple of other 3-loss SEC teams in Ole Miss and South Carolina before you get to the highest ranked Big 12 team, which is Arizona State at 15. Miami's lost to Syracuse, McCash, drops them 6 spots in the college football playoff rankings. Was it bad enough in your mind to have them fall behind Alabama despite having one less loss?
Oh, that's tough. I will say, I mean, Syracuse is 9-3 on the year.
They're a good team.
So they're a good team. They're a good team. So you drop them 6, but Ohio State only drops 4, losing to a bad Michigan team.
Yeah.
A worse team on paper, a worse team. This proves right here now the SEC and the Big Ten are the only 2 conferences that matter. Because let's think about last year. You had an undefeated ACC champion that was left out of the playoff last year. You're telling that conference your best is not good enough. And the fact that SMU could go in and possibly lose to Clemson in the championship game, and them talking how championship games, win or lose, do not affect you. You're not going to be penalized for losing. But I guarantee you, if SMU loses on Saturday, they're out of the playoffs.
You think so? Because I think that's
Absolutely.
where the conversation – I think that's what the conversation boils down to. And to me, like, if I take these rankings at face value and I say, you know what, if SMU loses this game to Clemson, Clemson's in, they get the automatic qualifier, but SMU 3 spots ahead of Alabama with 1 less loss at that point, they should probably be in. But I think like you're onto something though, that the committee's going to look at the quality of wins. And I think they can make an easy argument that Alabama has more quality wins than SMU does, even going to the ACC championship, winning 11 football games, doing what they do in the ACC. I think it opens the door for that possibility. I do think that's the conversation, though. And in my opinion, I think it's pretty simple. And this is our guy C. Hutch in the comments again. Clemson wins and knocks off Alabama. That is how it should go with SMU staying in the playoffs. I actually agree with that. I think if Clemson wins, then SMU is that last team that's going to get in, or should be the last team that gets in. I think if SMU wins, then Alabama should be that team. But this committee with the voting and the bullshit that they're talking about, they open the door to really do whatever they want to here. And I think there is, I don't know that it's necessarily Alabama bias, because I don't know how you can justify looking at this Alabama team and thinking it's the same Alabama program as years past. It's been a rough year on the road for this team. They've dropped 2 games that they had really no business losing.
No business.
And a tough one in Knoxville on the road. It just looks like a completely different team than at home in Tuscaloosa. Like, I don't know how you can give them the pass for being Alabama. I think it's more of what you were talking about. I think it's Big Ten, SEC, super conferences. The committee kind of wants to reward these programs for assembling in this fashion. And I don't know, man. I think there's something to this notion that's been out there that the SEC, the Big Ten, have strong enough positions in college football that they can say, well, if we don't like what you're doing, College Football Playoff Committee, why do we even have to participate? We've got like 20 teams in our league. We can branch off and we can have our own playoff. And then it can just be Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, and Alabama competing for the SEC national championship or that sort of thing. And so I do, like, when I see stuff like this and I hear these explanations where it clearly looks like, if you look at the list, SMU should be the team in, win or lose. But you're having these conversations about, well, maybe even though Alabama has 3 losses, they have more quality wins than SMU, and we can finagle them in that way. It kind of gives credence to these rumors that are circulating that they just want to cater to the SEC and the Big Ten. Am I off base here, or what do you think about shoehorning Alabama in because of the conference affiliation?
I mean, that's what it's going to be. They're gonna find a way to get, Alabama in, just as I expected them to do so. And Alabama is really a 2-point conversion away from possibly having a fourth loss with that South Carolina game
South
back
Carolina.
midway of the
Yeah.
season. But yeah, I mean, if SMU is to beat Clemson, they would have just as many wins against ranked opponents as Alabama does. 3
Mm,
and 3.
mm.
If you look at it, Alabama beat Missouri, LSU, and Georgia in the year. And I mean, granted, that the Georgia game is the one shining thing you can definitely put above, the best win that SMU has, without a doubt.
Yeah.
You smoked Missouri, which I don't think is a good team to begin with, but for some reason they're still hanging around the top 25. Uh, you beat a pretty good LSU team very handedly. But you didn't play a juggernaut of a schedule, with Western Kentucky, South Florida, and Mercer on your schedule. So let's not be a hoity-toity. You didn't. And granted, you didn't have the easy Texas schedule in the SEC. You know, I think you played much tougher schedules in the past, and you're being rewarded for a weaker one this year when you struggled against some teams and lost to teams you had no business losing to, especially Oklahoma. I think the Oklahoma loss should have been the nail in the coffin for this Alabama team.
I don't know, man. I think the Vandy loss was worse, honestly, because that
Historically,
Oklahoma
yes.
well, I just mean like that
Okay.
Oklahoma crowd was ruckus that Saturday night. That was a hostile environment for them to go on the road in and play Brent Venables. Listen, I mean, draw I the man knows defense. The man
Yeah.
can coach defense. They've got some defensive talent. It was a defensive masterpiece that they put on against Alabama. I felt like that was just a tough game, a tough matchup for Alabama. The Vanderbilt game, you come to Nashville where like it felt like 70% of the stadium was Alabama fans here in Nashville,
You're being fair
and
with that 70%.
you're scoring points like crazy, and you can't stop Vanderbilt, and they hang. I don't know how many touchdowns Diego Pavia had in that game. I don't recall, but you I don't know. To me, that's a little more hard to forgive, but we're illustrating the point that both of these are pretty bad losses.
Yeah, absolutely. You only scored 3 points. When's the last time an Alabama team only scored 3 points or didn't score a touchdown?
Yeah. Yeah. I
I mean,
mean,
I don't have the answer to that, but I guarantee you it's been a long time.
yeah, it's pretty tricky. So I do want to ask you though, because Miami rounds out the top 12. Right now, they would be the first team out because the Big 12 champ, no matter who it is ranked 15th or 16th. They would get one of the automatic bids. So I just want to ask you, like, all the damning things we've said about Alabama, who do you think wins on a neutral field, Alabama or Miami?
Oh, I would have to go Alabama. If Cam Ward's hitting on all cylinders, I would probably maybe lean towards Miami because their defense looked really good the first half of the season, and and then had some rough outings of late, especially in those 2 losses to Georgia Tech and Syracuse, where Syracuse could scored at will basically. Um, but if we were playing today, I would lean towards Alabama.
I would too, and I think that's kind of interesting to think about as well. So it's you wonder if they're in the room thinking, talking this out, like just somebody asked the question, well, who wins if we're talking between these two teams, who wins on a neutral field right now? And I think
Yeah.
that's probably ultimately I think that's probably the biggest thing, that and the quote unquote quality wins that they've touted in the meeting so far. Before we move on, I do want to ask you though, if Alabama can stake a claim to a playoff spot, do Ole Miss and South Carolina have pretty compelling cases of their own, or do you think they are rightfully on the outside looking in?
I honestly think all 3 should be left out. And granted, I'm an Ole Miss guy, went to school there, all that good stuff. Ole Miss had some ugly losses, And that Kentucky loss is really the one being held against them because it was at home. Their losses to to LSU, Kentucky, and even Florida 2 weeks ago were all close games. They were one-score games. So I guess collectively, I would say their losses outweigh Alabama's, but Alabama's given a little benefit of a doubt because their losses were on the road. And then South Carolina, I just think they stumbled coming out of the gates, and that's what hurt them most. And then I kind of have to move them out because they lost to both Ole Miss and Alabama. So I can't really even put them on the radar of taking one of those spots from those teams.
It's crazy, man. If they had just won that game that they should have won, the bogus call in the LSU game, LSU wins 36-33 on a nail biter. If South Carolina wins that game, like they probably should have, we're not even having a conversation. South Carolina's in. It's pretty interesting. I don't know what that one game is for Ole Miss, but I'm sure you could make a compelling argument as well. I know they have a pretty ugly loss. They lost to Kentucky, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Kentucky at home. All three of their losses were one-score losses.
Yeah. So they had 3-point loss to LSU in overtime as well.
Yeah.
A game that they probably should have won. So well, that's how the dominoes fall, as they say. One last question before we talk about the championship weekend ahead. What the hell happens if UNLV upsets Boise State? Is Boise State still a playoff team? Do we just get two group of 5 reps?
That's a great question. I think it would boil down to how the game went. If it's a last second game, Genty gets hurt in like the first quarter or whatever, but Boise's still able to fight. I think in all reality, because of where they're ranked as the 10th team in the nation, I think they would drop, even though they're losing to a fairly good ranked team that, granted, they've already beaten once.
Mm-hmm.
I think they deserve to still be in it if they lose. But you and me and the rest of the world know good and damn well that will not happen.
I'm kind of with you. Even crazier scenario, if UNLV wins a close one and Army rocks Tulane, is there any chance Army could still get into the playoff, could leapfrog both teams?
I can't see that happening at all. Army's going to get boat raced by Tulane anyways, so we won't have to worry about that at all.
Yeah, fair
Tulane,
enough.
I'm happy it happened, but Tulane fucked themselves by getting destroyed by Memphis last week.
Yeah, man, that's kind of wild. That is kind of wild.
To go back real quick, the last time the Tide was held without a touchdown was 2011 against LSU.
Yeah, that was a field goal game, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was like 9-6 final.
The game of the century, as it's dubbed.
Yeah, the game of the century. I remember that. All right, well, let's talk about championship weekend. We've got 3 conference championships on Friday night. These look like going to be pretty good games, I think. Let's start with the Conference USA Championship. I'm surprised they found 2 good teams from this conference to play for the title game. Sorry, that's just sour grapes because MTSU had a bad season. But nonetheless, Western Kentucky and Jacksonville State meet, both teams at 8-4. Jacksonville State favored by 4.5 in this one. Takes place Friday, 6 p.m. Central on CBS Sports Network. Man, Jacksonville State's playing some pretty good football right now. I know Western Kentucky has kind of found their footing a little bit, but it's hard for me not to like Jacksonville State at -4.5 here, McCash. What do you feel about this game?
Well, it's funny because the 2 teams met last week, and Western Kentucky picked up a close win. And I don't know how if the conference championship game was already set in stone when they played last weekend, but my guess would be that it was. And
it was for Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State earned the bid 2 or 3 weeks ago, even, and it was just down to Western Kentucky, Liberty, and Sam Houston State. Liberty might have been knocked out last week, and it just came down to Western Kentucky and Sam Houston State this week.
Yeah, they both Western and Sam Houston finished at 6-2, And Sam Houston's 9-3 to Western's 8-4. So I guess there's a tiebreaker scenario that I'm not aware of. But
conference ranking.
Okay. So with that said, I think maybe this game from last week that Western Kentucky won meant more to them. And Jacksonville State's like, look, we'll just see you next weekend when it really matters. And I like Jacksonville State to bring home the championship this Friday night.
So we're in agreement there. That point total is set at 57.5. I'm going to say take the over. I think this is going to be a fireworks show on Friday night. I think this is one of the games that, like, two teams that a lot of people probably haven't watched much of this season, but I think they're going to light it up. I think it's going to be a pretty entertaining game. You know, you've been at work all week. You want to just rest on a Friday night, crack open a cold beer, prop your feet up, put this game on the tube. And then an hour later, you got a couple of other games kicking off. The Mountain West Championship that we just talked about, UNLV, 20th ranked team in the college football playoff, 10-2, taking on Boise State, 11-1. They are ranked number 10 right now. Boise State is not only favored to win the Group of 5 spot for the playoff, but they're ranked above any Big 12 team. And I think that will hold if they win. They're in play for one of the 4 byes this week as well.
Yeah.
The Broncos are favored by 4. I look at that line, McCash, and I think, damn, that's a little lower than I would have expected. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Boise State's going to come out and try to set an example like, hey, this is ours. It's been ours all year. You're not taking it away from us, no matter how close the first matchup was. But to go back to what you're talking about, trying to get a second team in like Army, it got me thinking. I was like, Army's not that far behind the Big 12 champion. And so the two teams that are playing for the Big 12 championship. So if Army could pull off an upset against Tulane and win emphatically by a couple of scores, it probably won't happen because they're not ranked high enough. But I think it'll be close to where we might almost see Army sneak into it. But again,
that would be so crazy.
Tulane's going to boat race Army. But back to Boise State. I think Boise State's just going to lay the smack down. Genty's going to run ragged like he has all year. I expect him to get like 3 or 4 touchdowns, like 250 yards. And then, Boise's going to be like, hey, we're number 4. Go ahead and give us our bye. We'll see you after Christmas.
Yeah, well, that American Championship is going to be going on at the same time as the Mountain West Championship, which is interesting because you're looking at that Group of 5 spot coming down to these 2 games pretty much. And I think you're right. I think the simplest outcome is Boise State wins. I think they win emphatically. They make a statement. There will be no denying they are the best of the bunch, but it will be kind of fun if there's a little bit of drama early on in these games. Again, I'm just thinking about the working man here. All right. You've had a long, hard work week. You want to come home. You want to watch some good football. Let's hope for some drama. Tulane favored by 5 in that one. I'm kind of like the Boise game, kind of surprised it's that low, but I guess, the championship vibes and Army's 10-1, it's not like this is a bad football team, but Tulane's pretty hot right now, or to end the season last week notwithstanding. But -5 for the Green Wave, McCash. You buying or you selling there?
Oh, I'm buying. I love Tulane in this game. I think the game last week between Tulane and Memphis really showed that Memphis was the better team in the conference all year. They just stubbed their toe. It happened.
Yeah.
Army is a good team, but they've played nobody. They had the softest schedule in Conference USA when it comes to conference play because they didn't play Tulane. They didn't play Memphis. They didn't play San Antonio. They didn't play South Florida. They avoided all the best teams in the conference this year. I don't know how that happened. They took advantage of it. 10-1 with the 1 loss to Notre Dame. But I love Tulane -5. I don't care if it is in West Point. I know it's going to be cold. That's the only chance I give Army is that Tulane doesn't respond well to the weather. But I still think Tulane gets the win here and covers.
Saturday morning, we go to the Dr. Pepper Big 12 Championship. Now, this will be deciding a playoff spot because there ain't no doubt about it. the way these two teams are ranked right now, one's getting in as the Big 12 champion and the other is not. This is Iowa State at 16, Arizona State at 15. Both teams are 10-2. The spread on this one is Sun Devils by 2. I'm back in Arizona State here, McCash. I don't know how much of them you've gotten to watch this season. This is a fun team. Cam Scatabo is just running roughshod over the Big 12. He had 177 yards, 3 touchdowns against rival Arizona last week. Granted, Arizona's not that good, but still, he's had several games that he's been dominant in, the running back for Arizona State. I'm a big fan of Sam Levitt. I think he's going to be an interesting prospect when we start talking about the NFL draft on down the line. This is an Arizona State team that has some firepower going up against the experienced Iowa State staff that's been there before. Matt Campbell has been in these big games, coaches defense pretty well. This kind of feels like strength versus strength right here, talking about this Arizona State offense going up against the Iowa State defense here. 2 points, the sports books say, separate these two teams. Where are you leaning in this one, McCash?
I'm the exact opposite of you, sir.
Oh,
I'm taking the Cyclones plus the points, even though I don't want or need them. I believe in Rocco Beck. I saw him play firsthand last year in the Liberty Bowl against Memphis. I'm a big fan of his. They run by committee. They had 2,000 yards rushing for the year, and they spread it to everybody. Rocco has his favorite. He has 2,000-yard receivers in Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins. I think this is going to be a very entertaining game and could easily be the best conference championship game we see all weekend. But I'm riding them Cyclones to the playoffs.
We've got Ohio and Miami of Ohio in the MAC championship. Ohio 9-3. If I'm not mistaken, this would be their first MAC title. I think I watched a little bit of their game against Ball State because I had a Buffalo conference championship winner ticket in my my betting app, and I needed Ball State to pull off that upset. They didn't, but I believe they were talking on the broadcast about this being Ohio's first MAC championship appearance. They are 9-3. Miami of Ohio, who was quite heavily favored, quite a few books in the MAC going into the season, were supposed to have better season than 8-4, but they're 8-4 nonetheless. This number is sitting at Red Hawks by 1.5. I kind of like Ohio in this spot, though. I kind of think they've got the mojo going for them after a big win last week, playing for their first MAC title. I should have verified if that was true before I start basing my opinions and broadcasting it all over the internet. But nonetheless, I like Ohio in this one. Who do you have?
I'm going to rock with Miami in this one. I mean, when you got Blaine Gabbert's brother behind the center,
there you go.
That's all I need. I don't know a lot about either team. I'd be lying if I knew much about the MAC this year. The MAC is usually a lot of fun to watch, but and it was to start the season when you had Northern Illinois with their big upset, and they just fell apart. So I'm going to go with the Red Hawks and Mr. Gabbert to bring home the championship.
3 p.m. Central on ABC, the Texas Longhorns, 2.5-point favorites playing the Georgia Bulldogs in the SEC championship. Earlier in the season, man, it didn't look too pretty for Texas in this one. Any chance they can get revenge here?
No. I think Georgia, even though I don't think Georgia's a great team by Georgia standards of late years, I do believe that Georgia is going to kind of boat race this team. They beat Texas by 15 the first game. I see a lot of this happening again on a somewhat neutral field, even though Atlanta's not that far from Athens. But now, if something was to happen and Mr. Manning was to come into the game, that might change it a little bit for me.
Now you're speaking my language. I was going to say the same thing. Depends on who's starting at quarterback. I'm not the biggest Quinn Ewers fan, and I think what you see is what you get. I think he likes to play point guard out there, but I think this offense takes on an entirely different dynamic with Arch Manning out there. Be interested to see if Georgia gets up again in this one, if they make some sort of quarterback switch. But I'm with you. I kind of like Georgia in this spot. Let's talk about the Sun Belt Championship. I know too many people that are getting stoked about this one, but I'm stoked about this one. 6:30 Central Time Saturday night on ESPN. 9-3 Marshall, 10-2 Louisiana. Louisiana favored by 6. That sounds about right in this case. I think they're gonna win big. This has been a pretty special season down in Lafayette. I don't know if I know in Tennessee it's Lafayette, but down in Louisiana,
Lafayette.
I believe it's Lafayette.
Yes.
Special season down there to get to 10 wins. Marshall has kind of had to fight back to get back into the Sun Belt Championship. I think they'll be spunky. They'll be up for the fight. But ultimately, I like Louisiana in this one. You got any thoughts on the Sun Belt Championship?
No, I'm taking them Raging Cajuns as well. I think they're going to win easily in this game. So kudos to them for having a great season. They were one of those teams at the beginning of the year with Liberty and such that were mentioned for that group of 5 playoff spot.
Yeah.
But they slipped up against Tulane and then had a late loss, a close loss to South Alabama. But, I gotta roll with the Cajuns in this one nonetheless.
Yeah, fun team to watch if you get the chance to. The Big Ten Championship, I don't think anybody expected to see Oregon and Penn State on December 7th with Ohio State out of the fold altogether. 11-1 Indiana sitting on the sideline as well. Penn State kind of feels like that team that we've forgotten about a little bit. They've just been kind of steady Eddie. They've been doing James Franklin things this season. When they get in the big game against Ohio State, they lose, but they win everything else. And now here they are. They've earned the right to take on the Oregon Ducks. Oregon has seemingly turned it on in recent weeks, but they've had some weak moments this season that has made them look gettable. They are favored in this one, McCash, 3.5 points. Any chance that Penn State pulls off the upset, or do you think we're going to see big game James again?
Yeah, history would tell you that the easy money is Oregon because big game James does not show up for big games.
Yeah.
He likes to sit them out. Where's this being played at? Is it in Oregon? Or do they
I think
have
it's in Indianapolis, neutral site.
Oh, it's in Indy. Okay. So it's neutral site.
So.
It's indoors. It's indoors. You don't have to worry about the weather. Something tells me to take Penn State because that line is so low.
Yeah.
But I can't go against Oregon. Oregon's been, on fire all year. They've had some close wins, especially that Wisconsin game a couple weeks ago that stands out. But then Penn State, outside of that Ohio State loss, has basically blown everybody out that they faced, minus like the Minnesota game.
Yeah, I was about to say they played some bad teams except for Minnesota, and Minnesota gave them a fight. So it's interesting. I'll tell you this, McCash. A little more juice to that offense than I think people think of when they think of James Franklin and Penn State. I just finished up my my Drew Aller tape study, which you can read my evaluation of him on Stacking the Inbox, stackingtheinbox.com. I think he's got some juice in that arm. This offense goes through Tyler Warren, the tight end that may be the first tight end selected in the draft next spring. They've got some pieces. They've got some pass rushers. They've got some defensive backs. Like they've got some dudes for Penn State. Like
they always do.
I think to your point, I think it would be wrong to just completely sleep on Penn State altogether because of the past history. But I just feel like Dan Lanning gets his teams ready for the big games like this. And that's why I'm ultimately leaning Oregon in this matchup. And I do think they cover. I think this is going to be one of those games that's probably interesting for the first half. And then we see Oregon pull away pretty late. Did you give a final prediction, by the way?
I'm leaning Oregon. As much as I want Penn State to win, I think Oregon gets the job done too.
Gotcha. And then lastly, that leaves us with one more, and it is the game that I think has all the drama in it this weekend because there's a lot riding on what happens in this matchup. 17th ranked Clemson at 9-3 taking on 11-1 SMU, who's sitting there ranked 8th, comfortably in the college football playoff race right now. This game is being played at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's the ACC championship. A playoff spot is going to be on the line regardless. It's just a matter of whether or not the loser, should it be SMU, still gets into the playoffs. So high drama in this one, McCash. SMU favored by 2.5. Seems like they're just begging you to take the Mustangs here. What do you think about this matchup?
This matchup scares me because it's in Charlotte, so it's essentially a home game for Clemson. Charlotte's only about a 2-hour drive from Clemson, South Carolina. SMU coming all the way from Dallas. We have 3 games this Saturday, or Friday and Saturday, between the Mountain West, the Big 12, and then the ACC that are all loser leave town matches.
Pretty much,
basically. Those like myself and you could argue that SMU, win or lose, deserves to be in. I still think they won't if they were to lose, even though I think they should. I'm going to be rooting, and I'll probably put my money on SMU, but something tells me big time Dabo's going to show up this Saturday and try to put himself back in the mix of one of the greatest at coaching today.
Yeah,
Much as I don't want that to happen.
I don't want that to happen either. It wouldn't have happened if Miami could have just handled their business against Syracuse, but nevertheless, here we are.
Yeah.
I think Clemson has played some good football as of late. I mean, despite losing last week to South Carolina, South Carolina's a good program. They've had a surprisingly good season. I don't think that's anything to hang your head over. But man, I will say, I don't know. This is going to be a different level for this SMU team, because this is going to be, to your point about Big Game Dabo showing up. Excuse me as I try not to just burp into the microphone. The lights are going to be on brighter than I feel like this SMU program has played under in quite some time. And it's probably going to be a hostile environment. And I think a lot of those things play into Clemson's hands. And for me, it's difficult to see just the disparity, the gap between where these two programs are in terms of experience in games like these, that I ultimately think Clemson's going to come out on top in this matchup. So
yeah, I'm leaning that way. Clemson has the strength of schedule of the remaining teams in the top 25 rankings. Clemson's strength of schedule is 53, and then SMU, I think, is one of the worser teams of those 25 schools. I had them right here. Oh, they're 75th. So that's not that huge of a discrepancy, 75 to 60.
Yeah.
I really want the Mustangs to win. As an American Athletic Conference fan, they left us last year, but I want them to get the job done.
There you go. We made it through Championship Saturday, McCash. You got any parting shots before we get on out of here today?
No, I'm about to head down to the FedEx Forum to watch my number 16th ranked Memphis Tigers basketball team take on Conference USA favorite Louisiana Tech.
How about that? Good game at the FedEx Forum tonight. So you go enjoy yourself. You stay warm down there. How often does it snow in Memphis?
Well, I've only been here 2 years. This is my second winter, but as a kid, before climate change happened, it would snow all the time during the winter months.
Yeah.
But now that the Democrats run the atmosphere, that's a joke, kids. We probably not as much as it does in Nashville, really.
Cool.
We get more ice than anything, just like you guys do.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, stay warm down there. Nonetheless, enjoy the basketball game. We will be back next week to recap the action from Championship Saturday and talk about the final rankings. They're going to be out. We're going to know the playoff field when we do this show again next week. So thank you guys for tuning in, for hopping in the chat with us, hanging out with us on this fine Wednesday evening. For the utility man, Stephen McCash, I'm Big Natural Stoney Keeley. And until next time, you stay classy, college football fans.